Right, so it's time for another Siebel installation video because it's 2025 and it's February, no, it's March, and 25.2 has been released. So I have a Windows machine here, Windows Server 2022. It has an Oracle database server on it already, so I will not go into details about installing Oracle database. This is all about the Siebel 25.2 installation experience on Windows. There's also a patch we have to apply, so that might be different on later versions. And I have extracted the installers, and that produces that disk 1 folder. Well, there's maybe a disk somewhere, and we have install as usual, and we have setup.bat, which we run as administrator. So you have, if you have watched other videos on our YouTube channel, you will have seen similar things. So we are going to do a fresh install into, well, the Siebel /MDE folder. So that's our new Siebel home. We click next. We can pick the languages. That'll be, well, let's add, just for the fun, let's add 2 language packs here. Make sure if you use non-ENU languages that you extract the correct zip file, which is at the time of this recording the 3rd one, 3 of 12. And so you have these language files actually. And also when you do a fresh install, as we do, you have to extract the zip file with the master repository, so you can actually select it here. You couldn't select if you haven't extracted it, so that's your check mark. And I want to configure the enterprise or internal application container, and I want to configure the application interface or external application container, which application container translates to Tomcat. Siebel web client, nope, thank you. But Siebel tools we install later, so don't install them in one go, even if it's possible. It just messes up your folders, and it's not good style to have folders that are messed up. So now for the ports, the enterprise internal ports, let's go with 9011, 9012, 9013 for internal. Let's keep the external ports, 443, 80, quite convenient here. So these ports will be assigned to the Tomcat servers. And then we have the application interface authentication, which is the primordial username, as I like to call it. And for the sake of demo and for easy remembering that password, I just copy paste. So my password is sadmin lowercase. Confirm that. My application context is Siebel, so that's the part in the URL where it says Siebel. You can change that if you want to. And now it's for the key stores and trust stores. So this is the moment of truth. Do you have your Java key stores ready? I do. And if you want to know how to create self-signed certificates, please refer to other installation videos in the same playlist where we use, well, the Black Sheep KeyMaker to create a self-signed certificate. So I have used Black Sheep KeyMaker here to create this very JKS Java key store, and I use it as a trust store because, well, it's simple enough in environment. So I have the password here. I just use the same file for the external Tomcat as well. So you're usually in higher environments, in more serious environments, you have a separate trust store, and of course you don't have a self-signed certificate, you have a real certificate from a real certification authority. But enough about certificates. Now, do we want to restart services? No, thank you. And here we go. So we can save that response file. Always a good idea to save it. Let's save that. That's install MDE RSP and hit install. So this will lay down the 25.2 MDE or folder structure for Siebel, serving as, well, a place where we can run or deploy internal components such as Siebel servers, or we can deploy the external application container both at the same time for a simple environment. And yeah, you can see it lays down the French language pack as well. So good that we have extracted the third zip file here. There's the German one. That big DLL file, by the way, that passed just by is the safe runtime repository, which contains the neos, or which basically you could use in safe boot. There's separate for neos actually. And mstrep.dat, that's the master repository of this very version. So that's the main file where you actually find the Siebel vanilla repository in. Why do we need it? Because we need it to actually lay down a new Siebel database, and that needs a repository, right? And that's in that very big file that we have seen being extracted. So it's almost done there, extracting lots and lots of stuff. And did I mention that we have 25.2 and that comes with its own Oracle instant client? So we'll see that in a minute. So I don't even have to install an Oracle database client, a 32-bit database client, because Siebel 25.2 is still 32-bit. But with 25.2, Oracle introduces the, well, embedded Oracle instant client for Siebel, much like the Java runtime is embedded for a long time now. So installation is complete. I close that and let's take a look at the folder that we created. So we have a Siebel folder here, we have MDE, and there's the, well, folder structure you might be familiar with if you have used Siebel before in the modern infrastructure or you have watched some videos. So here's the external internal containers. Here's the DB server part with the supporting files for which we need later to install the database. There's the gateway server, the few, if it serves as a gateway, it uses those files. And there's the Oracle DB client. So I want to check a few things. First of all, I want to check if anything happened to the path. And yes, the system path variable now features prominently the Siebel MDE Oracle DB client folder. So that's new. It's the first time this happens in the 30-year history of Siebel. So now my Oracle database client is actually the one provided by Siebel. If I open a command line, type SQL+. Okay. Couldn't find it, which is probably missing some Windows redistributables here. Let's do a where SQL+. So you see when Windows looks for SQL+, it will use this one. And good that we actually tested that, so that was not on purpose. If you get this error, usually you're missing Windows redistributables. So Visual C++. So let's go get them. So I'm Googling for Windows redistributable C++ all-in-one, which I found very useful. And that's, well, a page that provides that. You judge for yourself if you find that safe or not. So let's download them. Well, select the server. Well, let's check the German server, because my cloud is in Germany, and there's that. So I can extract that. And I will just go with the latest one, which is here the one for 64 and 32-bit. So the 32-bit is probably what's missing, because we have a 32-bit client. If in doubt, install, well, all of them, but it's probably a better idea to just install them one by one. And then give it a try in a fresh shell. And bingo, it was the 32-bit 2017 to 2022. Always a good idea to start from, well, with the youngest redistributable. Okay, we have a client shipped with Siebel, and that client has a network folder and an admin folder, and there will go the TNS names. So I have my Oracle database here. And here in that folder, DB Home Network Admin, I have the original TNS names, which points to an empty database, ORCL, Oracle. And so that should be a good place as any for copying. So that should be a good file as any. So copy it over to the Oracle database client in our fresh install. And now let's do a SQL plus and try to connect to ORCL as the sysdba, and we're in. And I can tell that it's using the new client because it's 1923 here, so very late, well, a very recent version of the Oracle 32-bit client. So now, from now on, Oracle ships the database client. So when anything changes inside Siebel that requires a different client, Oracle can ship it. So very good. And that prepares us probably for the 64-bit future of Siebel CRM with Oracle Database 23 AI and everything. So bright future ahead here. Okay, so the client installation is included here. So that's out of our way. So let's use that installation to actually install the Siebel database. So because it's a Windows installation, I can just go to the Start menu, find the Siebel Enterprise folder here, and there's Database Server Configuration. And that's our database config wizard, nothing new here, even if it's Siebel 25.2. Let's make sure those directories are good, and we want to install Oracle, install the database, and we have to do one thing as the sysdba, but we'll see that in a moment. Yes, and I have to run grunt user SQL. Okay, so let's do that. Let's open new shell. Let's go to that database. Okay, and we run from that folder. That should be grunt user SQL in the Oracle folder. Let's see if we hit it. Yeah. So that's a script that prompts you for the table owner name. We use Siebel uppercase. And it also prompts you for passwords. So we keep things simple here. Your mileage will vary on those passwords. It's not very clever to have those simple passwords, but it's a simple environment. And we need table spaces. Okay. We need to create a table space first. Right. Okay, let's skip that. So I have a create table space command right here. Create a table space called Siebel, database file, Siebel DBF. Yeah, usual bits. Shouldn't take too long. And I also run this command to not verify any passwords. So now we can try again to run the grant user. Okay, here we go again. So now we use the Siebel table space, and we use the temp table space here, and we have the passwords for admin, for the LDAP user, for guest CST, guest ERM. Okay, and that's it. So grant user has been run. We have a table space, we have run grant user, so we have our initial roles. And just to make things even easier, we have commands that should run, of course, in SQL+. Which we need to amend a little bit. So we do these alter statements and give Siebel and admin unlimited quota on the database. Okay, and we also set open cursors to 5,000, which is probably a good number for whatever comes next. And what comes next is we check grant user has been run, and we can specify the table owner and the connect string, which is ORCL. That's our TNS connect string. And we have a Unicode database. We have English as the base language. And the database user is admin. Here's the password. Table owner Siebel. There's a password again. Do we need that external Oracle ODBC driver? Well, we register it. And the table space is just Siebel. No parallel indexing. The SSA role is the vanilla grant, and we have a log output directory. And we apply the configuration changes now. So we can click next, and this launches good old Siebel upgrade wizard, still in charge in Siebel 25.2. And let's see how it completes all these tasks. Oh wow. So that's impressive, because in not sure when Oracle did change that, but do you actually see that? It's like, I don't know how many windows, how many shells. It's creating the tables and indexes in parallel. So not just one big file that runs sequentially, but it's multiple files that create different tables at the same time, different indexes. And that, of course, should take less time than creating the tables and indexes sequentially. So this is a change that Oracle made, well, somewhere in the past few months. So 25.2 has that feature. also probably during an upgrade process that's happening. I cannot say for sure because I haven't run an upgrade to 25.2 or higher yet. Well, that's sure damn impressive. And that should be done in no time. I could just keep on talking. And, well, the first, you see the first shells are starting to close, so it's all done. So those 6,000 tables and 20,000+ or more indexes, they're laid down in a matter of minutes. Okay, they're closing fast. I hope you appreciate me not stopping the video here and just babbling along to what I see on the screen. That's my reaction video, if you will. So, still a little bit to go here. Let's check on the upgrade wizard. Can we pull it over here? Yep. So this is still at letter E. That's probably all the EIM tables. Probably closing soon. Yep. Even more. Okay. And, well, it's now importing data into those new tables. That's the Siebel seed data. There will be 2 seed data imports, one for the non-translatable seed data. And is that speedy or not? Wow, that's a modest VM I'm running. So that is the non-translatable seed data import will be followed by the translatable seed data import for English. If you want to have language packs, you have to run the database config wizard for each language again. Maybe if we have time, we'll do it. So it's just we'll import the English ones. And a big chunk of action that happens or will happen soon is the import of the repository data. So that master repository, that file we have seen, that will be actually used to create the design and runtime repository with the vanilla features of 25.2. And of course that includes everything that you would have to import using a repository upgrade if you would imagine an update from a previous version such as Siebel, let's say 23 or something. You would have to bring the new repository stuff into the repository by the repository upgrade. This is not necessary when you do a fresh install. Of course, we don't always do a fresh install, so definitely. Okay, that's a familiar site. We're getting those constraint violations from the database. It's nothing bad. It's just that maybe that could be made a little bit faster because we don't care if the record already exists. But writing out these tons of logs, that slows down that process. It will finish soon enough, I hope. And I don't want to bother you anymore with looking at all these error messages passing by, which are benign, they're good. We're still okay, we're installing a Siebel database. So I will actually stop recording here and come back when anything interesting happened or has happened. So see you on the other side. Okay, let's check in on the machine. I was just away for a few minutes and it's already importing the repository. Wow, can you believe that? We'll have a Siebel environment up in no time. And I want to show you something interesting. If you find things like that interesting, if you look up ODBC data sources 32-bit, we sure have a new system DSN generated by the Siebel installer, the database configuration wizard did install. It laid that down, and it used a driver, and that driver looks like, if you recognize that name, it looks like the old driver. But if we look up the driver here, we find that Oracle has registered the same driver or the same DLL, the SQ Aura, the Oracle ODBC driver, twice. Once under this name, Oracle in Oracle DB client, the other time under this older naming convention, so not sure why. And any ODBC that will be generated by Oracle or by Siebel code will have that driver. So if we double click, we see that it's the Oracle ODBC driver configuration, and well, that's obviously the Oracle driver. So which means sometimes, and I did that too, you create your own custom ODBC data sources for doing Siebel stuff, and you go to the registry and modify them. So if you have done that in the past and you update to 25.2 higher, you will actually get into trouble because they still refer to the old Merant data direct driver that Siebel used before 25.2. So make sure to check your 32-bit ODBC DSNs here, and the equivalent, of course, on Linux or Unix style platforms. So the repository import is well underway. Well, yeah, there's a lot of records to import, a few millions of records, so that will take probably a little bit longer. So we'll just come back when this process is finished, I guess, or when anything interesting happens. So again, I'll stop the video for now, stop the recording, not the video, and see you on the other side. Well, that seems like the installation of this Siebel 25.2 vanilla database has performed well. So all the steps completed by the upgrade wizard. It's Windows, so it even opens up the summary HTML. So it generates that, which is new to me. So you would have to run the log parser manually to get that file, but it generated that file, so we can see all the steps. We can see the timing, so that reports 26 minutes, which is spectacularly fast for installing a Siebel database on a machine like that. So yeah, we see that the parallel flag here is interesting. Yeah, it has those 10 different shells to import tables. So even the import repository just took 13 minutes. Wow, that's the entire Siebel repository, design and runtime. So Oracle really did a lot to speed that up, and I believe that's also true for an upgrade from a version prior to IP17. You get that improved speed, but I'm speculating on this one. Maybe you can confirm in the comments if you've done an upgrade to 25.2. Do you see that speed during the upgrade as well? So it's nice that this file is actually generated for us. Now we can turn off, say thank you to the upgrade wizard, and the database config wizard is still open, so let's exit that one. And well, we have a database, so next step is, of course, to create a Siebel enterprise. So with the database installed and the Siebel software ready, we have one thing to do because it's 25.2, and in some releases Oracle also releases a patch, as is the case with 25.2. So this is just read the release notes carefully and you know which patch to apply. So there is not always a patch to apply, but this patch I have extracted, and there's a README file, so let's read that. We have unzipped it to a separate folder, set our Java home, stop all the services. Okay, let's make sure we have the Apache services here, which probably running. Yeah, so let's stop those services. Okay, services are stopped, and on Windows we run install bat with the home folder and the product to patch. And as it's, you can check the files ini to see what products. So there's a product code in this files ENI, and it's SES. You can also see the file that it will replace. So SES is the product. Okay, so let's open the command line, go to this folder, and we set the Java home to the JRE that comes with Siebel. So Siebel brings its own JRE. Here it is, and in 25.2 it also brings its own Oracle client and ODBC drivers. So we set that Java home, and then we can run install bat with the home folder, copy that, and we update the SES product. And that looks like, yeah, there was a backup, there was a copy, there's a version update. It looks like okay. And there should also be a version, Siebel version properties. Yeah, which has the POC number now. Okay, so we can see it's properly patched. Okay, so this was just for 25.2. We needed to apply that patch to have a complete supported environment as per the release notes. So always check your release notes that come with the Siebel software. Okay, so we now have a Siebel database freshly installed to 25.2, and we have a Siebel software on the machine. So you can also see on Windows the presence of the two Apache Tomcat containers, the internal and the external one, as a service. And before you start these services, you should actually be doing the following. Go to the properties and grab that executable path. So that's for the first one. Then open a command prompt, paste it in. Do not click enter before you change that to ES, RS to ES for edit service, and make that Tomcat 9W. So when you run that, you get this dialog. And in the Java tab of the dialog, change these meager memory pool settings to something that really suits a Siebel enterprise, and that starts for my demo at 2.5 gigabytes, and in real environments it's minimum 4 gigabytes. That's what Oracle recommends, and even more in production environments. So you must change that at all costs because it's too low by default. So I did that, and then let's just repeat that for the internal Tomcat. Again, change RS to ES. Okay, and we set that a little bit higher, 10 times higher actually. So now we can start the Tomcat. So start with the internal one. It's actually, well, I rebooted the machine and both are running. So they are in automatic mode. Let's change that too. So change to manual. And let's restart those services. So once they're restarted, you can go to your browser and we have that URL here. So you go to your URL. Remember the browser port numbers or the Tomcat port numbers that you entered. 443 is a default port, so you don't need to enter it. And you go /Siebel/SMC, and that's the only application running on the external Tomcat right now. And that should give you a login page. And you log in as the primordial user. So remember that user that you entered at installation time, the initial user. And if you don't remember that, well, suit yourself. So once you log in with that primordial user, you get this Bootstrap dialog. So the Bootstrap process has 3 steps. The first one is to identify a host name and port number for the gateway, for the machine that will act as the first gateway. And maybe you set up a gateway cluster later, and you need a TLS listener port for that. So I just use the same machine. And the port is the Tomcat HTTPS port of the internal Tomcat. So let's just verify that. If you're not sure about this, go to your internal Tomcat, go to conf, and open that server XML file. And here are the port numbers you specified during installation. You can change them later. And the big one here, the HTTPS port, that one is 9011. Okay, so that's why I know. And the TLS listener port you must choose a free port on that. That will be opened on that Tomcat to listen for, well, TLS connections from Server Manager. So let's save that. And it has identified that machine. It has checked the connection, checked the certificates, so it's all good. And by the way, if you're wondering, can I automate this? Open the browser developer tools and go to network. So it's a little bit too late now to grab the first request, but we can grab the second request. Grabbing the request means check the Cloud Gateway REST API and understand the requests that are made, and then you can automate it using curl or other REST clients. So now we have at step 2 of the Bootstrap, setting up the gateway. Actually creating the security profile, that's what this step does. So the security profile of a gateway uses a data source. So you must add a data source, expand that, give it a name, and you start typically with database. You can choose basic mode for development environments or advanced mode. You can also use LDAP or a custom SDK. Let's keep things very simple here. So we have the database running on the local host machine, the Oracle port, the service name, and the table owner. So you can add this, or you can, choose any other way. And click Next, and you have to select that database you created, that adapter, and give it a username and password for testing. Okay, and when you save that, it's okay. Google Chrome complains about the passwords, but we have a successful security profile validation. So we've created that security profile now. So now SMC can authenticate using that profile. So we can log in, or we are forced to log in with the new credentials. But before that, let's grab that request. So here you see that's the URL. It's a post. So if I copy that, and a post has a payload, and the payload was literally what I entered in the dialog. So that's how the SMC works, and it's interesting to see. And you can imagine if you have a postman or a curl command and you create a post request with that payload, then it will likely do the same thing without you having to do clicks in the browser. I'm using clicks in the browser, of course, to explain things and use the graphical mode, but I have videos on YouTube where I show how to use either Oracle-provided curl commands from, they are for Linux, and for Windows you also can find out ways to automate that. Also check out the request headers if you need to. It's using basic authentication. Okay, if we click here, we are back to the login page, and now we log in with the real database user account to complete the Bootstrap step. And that registry port, I have to choose a different port number here. That's the Zookeeper client port. And that username, make sure that this username, which you enter here, and the password is safe and secure, but reachable when you need it, because that's your ticket to Zookeeper direct login. That password will be encrypted, so you cannot retrieve it easily. So that's the username that you use to log into the Zookeeper directly if you need to, and the password. So very important to document that password somewhere and be able to find it quickly when you need it. Always keep your passwords maybe in a password vault or something. And now we run that step, and that sets up the Zookeeper and the gateway registry service. So we should see some movement here in the services. When we refresh that, maybe it's already there. No, not yet. So what I'm looking for is the Siebel gateway registry service. And it's automatic, so I changed that to manual. It's already running, so it's running because Zookeeper is running, so there's a lot going on. And now we have an empty Zookeeper registry for the new Siebel Enterprise, so there's no deployment yet. But we do have one profile, the security profile we have created. And you might want to grab that Bootstrap step here. That's the third step. So I missed the first step, but you know what to do. So these are all posts. And let's grab that payload, and you can see the payload is always the fields that you see in the dialogues. So that's the payload. Well, it's one way to document your password, is it? But keep that information safe. So once we have that empty Zookeeper registry, we must fill it with information, and the first part is to create profiles. And the first profile we will create is an enterprise profile. Now, enterprise profiles, there is one sample, and provided by Oracle, you can modify that, or you can, more likely, you can clone that sample, create your own profile with your new name. Let's call it training profile. So that's for the enterprise we create. And we need a Siebel file system. So we have a completely fresh machine here. So, well, we can use that Siebel folder, create a folder for the file system, and let's share it. And let's just add everyone with read write. Okay. So we have a network share. And let's test that. So we can do 2 our host name and fs, and there we are. That's our share. So that share is what goes here into that primary Siebel file system. And of course, in your case, it will be a different mileage. You would have different machines, but you eventually have a UNC path to it. Authentication, there goes the username and password to act as the Siebel system user, which is Satmin in my case. And the second tab, these are tabs by the way. You can also click next to reach the second page. We have an Oracle database, we have that connect string, we have a database user, and we have a table owner. That will be used to create an ODBC data source, by the way. So it's 25.2, so we're taking a closer look at the new ODBC drivers. The authentication profile, that's the security profile we have created earlier. And the encryption type, we choose Sysnappy without encryption. And also let's submit that. And in the network tab, you can grab the post request that creates an enterprise profile. Everything's a REST request. So the next time you do this, you can do it from the REST client of choice, and you don't have to do all this typing. So, yeah, that's all the things are entered, right? And that creates the profile. So profile is nothing if you not deploy it. So we will deploy that enterprise profile. So let's deploy that Siebel enterprise. So we go to Siebel deployment and click the plus, and you can deploy an enterprise if you haven't. So you can only deploy an enterprise once, or one enterprise per Siebel environment. And you pick the profile. So here's our training profile. You can choose between staging or deploy. So staging just sets it up for later deployment, and deployment, well, sets it up and deploys it immediately. And that's your enterprise name. So training is my enterprise, and that's the, well, let's call it training enterprise in the description. And again, let's watch the network tab and grab that REST request so we can learn how to deploy a Siebel enterprise from a REST call. So once we submit that, it goes into deployment mode, so we can also refresh that. And deployment, the legend says deployment in progress, which is a good sign. So you want to see it go fully green, but half green is halfway there. And there was this post request that I wanted to grab. And the payload is the most important part here. Oops, didn't copy. All right, so you see a deployment is has an action, deploy, name of a profile, some parameters. And let's see if it went through. Let's refresh one more time. Full green. So what has happened? We want to understand what happens here. It has, let's watch that file system. Remember we shared this folder, and now the subfolders in there. It's created right now. So that's what the enterprise deployment does. It sets up the structure of the Siebel file system. Of course, those folders are empty, but the folders exist. So we do have an enterprise, but there's no Siebel server. So let's change that. And in the profiles, we check the Siebel server profiles. There's one sample, which we can clone. And let's call it server 01 for lack of a better name. And you have to provide the username for the Siebel system username and the anonymous user. Remember, when you run grant user SQL, that's one of the users that you create. The default anonymous user. And you choose your component groups. And this is where a lot of people think, oh boy, what do I need? What do I check? Let's check all the boxes. Bad idea. Don't check all the boxes. Check the boxes that you really need for that first Siebel server to start up quickly and nimbly and swiftly. So the fewer boxes you check, the better. So you can always enable component groups after the Siebel server is created. So I just go with one component group, Siebel Web Tools, because that's a development environment. So choose a very small component group. Don't worry about EAI. You can enable that later. And the EAI component group has quite a lot of components. So let's turn that on later. So we just want the Siebel server to really start up super fast for this initial deployment. And you have a connection broker port, which should be fine if it's a fresh installation, and also that sync manager port. On the next page, there's nothing much you can actually do other than check, okay, Oracle database is the default here. So if you have a different database, you must choose it here. So let's submit that profile, and as always in this session, we want to grab the post request to create a server profile. So notice how it says profiles or deployments in those REST requests. Let's get that payload. Okay, we have a nice payload documentation for later, or we can use it to, well, create another server profile from a REST call. And that's a profile, so we need to go back to Siebel deployment. And notice how enterprise is gone, so we already have one. Can't have two enterprises for a Siebel enterprise, right? But you can have any number, well, not really any number, but up to lower three digits of Siebel servers, so nobody gets there. So you add a Siebel server, you must specify the host. So in my case, it's the same host name. I'm on the same machine. And the port number of an internal Tomcat on that machine. It must be running right now. So if you have of course you will have different machine names here, maybe different port numbers. And you choose your profile. Again, you can go for staging or deployment. And here in the parameters, you choose your server name. So that's my server 01, server 01, and you choose your languages to deploy. So depending on the language packs you have, so I have English, French, and German. This will deploy components in different languages. So let's say Siebel Web Tools in French or German is probably not fun to use, but If you use other component groups, you get them in the desired language. You get object managers with that language by default. So it's always a good idea to follow your language packs. And if we submit that, we get a post request. And again, we're keen on documenting those post requests today. And the payloads. And that triggers a lot of activity on the system. So we go to Task Manager. It's probably, yeah, you see there's a server config exe busy on that machine, which is specified as the Siebel server target. And you will probably witness here a startup of the Siebel server rather soon. So it's setting up the Siebel server right now, the service, and it will start it up. The Java exe that is so busy is the Zookeeper actually. So Zookeeper has a lot of things to write. Let's check out the command line column. Yeah, so that's Zookeeper. So, flurry of activity here. And you need to give the machine a little bit time to finish that server deployment because it's a lot of steps, and it will go half green first. And it will go hopefully full green once it's deployed. It will take a few minutes. Keep refreshing that. Let's check Task Manager. Still creating that service. Oh, there's the service. There's the Siebel server starting up, freshly born, if you will. And there should be, if you refresh the services on Windows, you should see the Siebel server set up as a service. And it's currently stopping. Don't worry, it's starting and stopping. And will start up again. So here we can see the components starting up. That's Siebel Web Tools and the system components starting up. And now you understand, if you check too many component groups in that initial profile, your Siebel server will just take ages, or well, maybe 15-20 minutes to start up and stop and start up again. And so this just takes a few minutes when you take the nimble approach. And of course you have to care about your component group assignments later, which is, well, what administrators do. So that's probably going to green already. No, not yet. Okay, so it's really waiting for it to be completely started up. And besides that startup that's happening, it has also done one thing. If you go to these ODBC data sources, 32-bit, 25.2 is still 32-bit, we have a new ODBC data source created. So as part of the first Siebel server that's deployed, or on that machine, well, on every machine where there's a Siebel server deployed, there's also a ODBC data source created with the name of the enterprise. And we are looking at 25.2 here. And we're interested in the changes to previous releases. So the big change here is that it uses a different driver. So when you double click it, you see it's the Oracle ODBC driver and not the old driver that Siebel used for decades, the Data Direct driver. So, and that driver sits in the Siebel home folder. So you don't have to deploy your own custom 32-bit Oracle database driver that you download, or database client with the driver. There might be reasons to install an Oracle ODBC client or Oracle database client on your own, but we keep things very simple here, so we can rely on that driver that is now shipped with Siebel 25.2 and higher. So that Siebel server is still starting up, but getting there. So let's refresh. Still half green. Okay, taking its time. So I will pause the video until it's finished. And indeed it has finished, so I refreshed one more time and my server goes green, and I keep the mouse over here because it says deployed. It does not say running. So a lot of people have the misconception that these green indicators mean everything's up and running. This is not true. If I stop the server, it's still deployed. So it just means it has been successfully deployed. I want to see that server is running. I can go to management, or I can even go back to deployment. There's a nice button here. Select your server and then click the management button. Yeah, it's just one other way to go there. And I can see server is in a running state. And that's a good sign. So we have a Siebel server. And what components is that Siebel server running? Well, not much. That's why it's so fast. We have Siebel web tools in, well, German, English, and French probably. Yeah. So, but no other components currently. So, for example, for the REST API to work or the SOAP API to work, we need an EI object manager. We need to assign the EI component group, and we'll do that. But that's administrative tasks that we are not showing in this installation video, so you know what to do with your Siebel server now. Okay, but can we access Siebel Web Tools? No, because we have one more profile, one more deployment to do. That's the AI, the application interface. And so we go to the profile section, and those sample profiles are actually very big. I use the basic one, and I always clone that, which takes a while because it's so big, and give it a name. So let's call it AI1, and we want this to be, well, HTTP 1.1 compliant. That's surely a good thing. And you have to fill in all the sections carefully. So the AI profiles are quite a beast. So there are some default settings, which are also required fields on the individual application. So I usually go for more than 900. Let's make it 9,000 timeout, which is very long time. 900 is 15 minutes. So that's 150 minutes. The guest session, yeah, it's okay. The warning, 60 seconds before timeout. These methods, commands you can leave here, and you have to take care of that anonymous username and password. And here's the REST inbound authentication. So that means how will your REST calls be handled. So you probably don't want any anonymous REST calls. But if you do, you should have your password set up here. And we're going for basic REST authentication for now. The logging should be set low, error is fine. And the REST inbound defaults, that way it gets a little bit complicated because the SMC expects the object manager to be up. And we don't have an EI object manager. So we just, well, fake it. We have to go back here and change that to EI object manager later. And that response URL is typically your proxy endpoint. We're not installing Siebel with a proxy here, but you probably will in real life. So you can go next. And that's the applications page. And this is where Oracle put a lot of sample application entries here. And I'm going to delete all but one carefully. Yeah, I can create them later anytime. So what I need is EAI and web tools. So everything else I don't need. So you see I've done that before. So let's just keep deleting that. Keep your profile nice and simple, because every single of these entries will have an object manager related to it. Okay, we're down to 2 entries, and let's make sure we have the object manager selected. Again, we are just faking it here for EAI. That actually should have EAI HTTP inbound transport configured. That's the SOAP endpoint that you need maybe later. And for web tools, we choose the web tools object manager. In enhanced authentication, you have these timeouts, and this is a required field. So even if you set it in the first page in the default, you must set it here as well. But other values like the anonymous user, etc., they are passed in from the first page. So only if you see an asterisk here, you have to provide a value actually. Okay, so, let's check the third page. There's nothing here to see, and also the page 4, well, usually can keep the defaults. So let's submit that, and we get a, well, it's funny that it's called SWS Siebel Web Server M something. And there's another post request for us to create a profile. And you see I've done many clicks. And probably in the future I want to do this from a REST call. So I grab the payload, which is substantial. So quite good to know that the SMC is just a REST client to the Cloud Gateway API. It always fascinates me. And everything I entered is here, including those application definitions. So that's why it's really big. So let's do a word wrap so you can see, yeah, that's quite big. And you can only save it in SMC when you have a Siebel server up and running. If you do it through REST calls, you can do it when a Siebel server is not up. So that's the good news here, if you will. So now let's deploy that AI. So we go to deployment plus application interface, and we need a host name and port, and that host name is typically the same at the beginning. And the port is, of course, the external Tomcat port, not internal. You're not deploying an AI on an internal Tomcat. Wouldn't work. And we choose our profile. We do deployment. Call it AI1. And again, we want to grab that request. So here we have the deployment request. And a relatively small payload. Okay, let's see if it's deployed. Yeah, goes green. So which means we should be able to at least log into Web Tools. So let's give it a try. So that's Siebel/app, and then we have Web Tools ENU, which is from that sample profile. Yep, we have touchdown. We have a login page for a Siebel application running on a Siebel server. So we have successfully set up our enterprise, now ready to be fully configured into, well, whatever you want to do with Siebel. Enable your component groups and so forth. So let's see if we can log in actually to WebTools. Okay. And that looks like WebTools to me. And it's, check, help technical support. It's application 25.2 and it's repository version 25.2 because I have installed a fresh Siebel Enterprise, a fresh Siebel database with a 25.2 version with the master repository. So anything you want to see in the Siebel repository, all the stuff that Oracle delivers through repository upgrades, if you update from earlier versions, post IP17, continuous release model, that's all in there now. And yeah, that ends this part of the demonstration. I will go on, so if you want to stick around, I will just go and enable component groups, enable EAI, the REST API, so stick around for more if you want to. So, yeah, you're still here, good. So let's check how we can enable additional component groups and grab the REST request, because we want later in our career, we don't want to do all these clicks in the UI. We want to fully automate an enterprise deployment and enterprise configuration. So now we're in the enterprise configuration phase. So we go to configuration and we have our enterprise and we have component groups here. And let's use a different view. Let's use component definitions. That's all the component definitions across component groups. And here we can easily query by group and see what component definitions are in here. So let's query. Remember, we need the enterprise application integration group because we want the REST API of Siebel and SOAP API to be fully operational. And that group has a lot of component definitions that we usually don't need. So if you really don't need it right away, you can deactivate them, but those will then not be available in your Siebel server. You can also set them to manual mode later, but I want to deactivate them because I don't need them. So Business Integration Batch Manager, deactivate. And as you can see, every click you do in SMC is a REST call. So here's the REST call to deactivate this component. So you get the idea how the URL looks like. And going to grab that URL because that's something I want to automate later. So, well, that's a simple payload if there is any. So it's a template file that I have saved. If I know the alias name of a component definition, I know how to activate and deactivate it now using a REST call. So I don't have to repeat that. Copy paste of the REST request. It will be fairly similar. So I just repeat deactivation for several other components in that group. Of course, the one I will leave active is EI Object Manager, and probably EIM I will leave active. And yeah, those receivers, if you use any of those receivers, of course you would leave them active in your environment. So I will stop the recording and come back when I have done all those deactivations. Okay, so you can see I have just left the... Oh, well, actually I don't need that one. This custom app I don't need either. So I just left the EI Object Manager, ENU, active, and EIM. If I would need any of those later, I can come back here, activate them, restart the servers, and we'll be fine. So now that component group has been taken care of, let's query for the call center, Siebel call center, probably, yeah. I want to use Siebel call center as well to have an application, and I repeat that I'm deactivating well, I keep the call center object managers, but I don't need eService or self-service, so I deactivate those. Again, you choose what you deactivate, and I'll come back in a moment. Okay, all deactivated except call center object managers in the 3 languages that I choose. So now I can go back to component groups. And let's find the EAI component group first. And then go to servers. And for good measure, we unassign first. So both flags are not set for that server. But I want to grab, because I want to grab those REST requests. So let's make sure it's assigned. And then click disable once because it enables, and enable. So we grabbed the assign action and we grabbed the enable action. So the header will be the same. So you see you have a REST command for everything. So that action is pretty self-explaining here. So let's also grab the enable action, because you have to do both to just be on the safe side. Assign and enable a component group. So EAI is assigned and enabled on server 1. And we repeat that with the call center component group. So notice how SMC is actually quite nifty. You can even have a filter here. Find your call center group, stay on the servers page, and it's already assigned, so you just need to enable it. So both flags should be yes. Does that server run call center now? No, it doesn't, because of course we have to restart the Siebel server. It might be 2025, but that Siebel server is from 95. So we have to restart it so it can read its configuration from Zookeeper and then start these components. And that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to log out here. And I'm going to restart that Siebel server. Let's stop it. And you probably know what happens during a server start. And so I will just pause the video recording until the Siebel server is restarted. Okay, that Siebel server should be up and running by now. So let's get back to SMC and check the management page for our server. Okay, that's probably fine. It lost connection. So let's try another thing you can do. Go to settings and refresh the configuration. Should reconnect everything. Let's see if that's true. Yep. Okay, so server's running. And we have components. So now we have EI Object Manager online, which, remember, we wanted that. We have call center online. So now we can go back to our AI profile. And yes, AI profiles are read-write. So another thing you might have forgotten about how Siebel works, the 64-bit part, the AI, that servlet that lives on a Tomcat, that reads its configuration from this profile. So you can change it and it will have the information immediately. Notice that a Siebel server profile once used is read-only. So that's why I couldn't go here and check the boxes for the component groups. I had to do it the traditional way. So here I can go and remember I had these REST settings. So let's edit that profile. And now I can pick, now you see shows only running object managers. And now the EI object manager is properly connected as the REST inbound data wrangler And in the application section, I can repeat that for the SOAP endpoint EIENU. And what about call center? So I can just maybe clone web tools. And of course, I'm going to rename it to call center ENU, and of course pick our call center. And the language, well, the language is just the second part of the URL. So call center /ENU. It indicates the language, but you can use it to indicate anything else. So, and let's maybe clone it one more time and just try the German object manager here. Let's put DEU as the language, and let's grab that REST request. We have a similar one, but when you want to change your profile, you see how the REST request would work. It's the entire thing. You cannot just do an individual update. So you see it's even bigger now than before. So it has more information. But you simply post, or is it a put or post? Let's check. It was a put. Yeah, of course it was, because it's an update. And that URL is of course important, because which one to update, it has it in the URL. It has the name of your profile. So that's how you update profiles, in case you need that, to do that using a REST call. Might be handy. So now we've updated the profile. Is it available immediately? Let's check. So we have that web tools URL working, but does it work with call center ENU? And yes, no restart required. The AI reads its configuration from the profile. Can we log in? Well, can we? Yes, we can. So there's Siebel call center, and for good measure, it's of course the 25.2 repository. So since it's a 25.2 repository, let's try something here, because since 24.6, Siebel has a new theme for side menu, and that's the Redwood theme. And it appears here quite naturally, because we have installed a fresh 25.2 database. If you want the Redwood theme in an older version of Siebel, which you update to 25.2 or higher, you must run the repository upgrade, which we do not have to do here. So it's just a demonstration that this database is feature complete, and that might help with evaluating new features. You just install a fresh Siebel database or get the sample database. Check out my other videos on that. It's always feature complete. So when I log out and log in again, I should be looking at Siebel in Redwood style. And I am indeed. Okay, that's the Redwood style theme. Okay, nice. What about the German one? We did have we did enable a German call center, so let's see how this goes. Oops, it's not very happy. That object manager is not happy, because we have just created an object manager that's looking for German strings and stuff like that, but there's no such German string, German LOVs in the database. We have to import that. So if you stick around a bit longer, we will be setting up the language packs completely. So non-ENU language packs, we are not ready for that. Okay, good to know. So, what about the REST API? How does it work? Does it not work? So let's just check out doing a little get call. I always like to do that. So you have to use v1.0 after Siebel, and then you can designate, for example, your data API. Let's choose the account BC, account BO, account BC, and do a describe. A describe should run with the anonymous user and give you the open API description for the account business component interface. How cool is that? Yes, that's a open API description of all the fields. A little bit scary. You can get it through the anonymous user. So you would like to go to your AI profile and go for the REST authentication and do not allow anonymous requests, right? We don't really want that. So let's see if anything changes when you submit that and run that again. Well, it gets a 401. 401 means not authenticated. So you cannot just use a URL like that to... You couldn't read any data, but you could read metadata, which is equally bad. So it might be a good idea to think about your application hardening and security. So just a side note here. So yeah, in the next part here, you waited long enough for that. Or you jumped right here using the timestamps. Welcome back. We will talk about language packs. So we have a English only, ENU only installation after installing Siebel and installing the database. So we can kind of prove that it's English only by going to Web Tools, and in the Object Explorer, let's search for symbolic strings, which is a translatable part of the repository. And so you can see all the symbolic strings now. And if you expand the symbolic string, you see its translations. And there's just ENU. So even if we run a German or French object manager or any language supported, it will not be capable of showing anything meaningful because there's no translation. So, of course, these are all standard strings, hundreds of thousands of standard strings in Siebel CRM. We need to import the language-specific strings. How do we do that? Well, we call upon our friend, the database server configuration wizard, which has, well, wizardry in it, built into it, which we can use. So we choose Oracle database. We keep installing the database. We're not, we do import repository because it's the repository part. We have to come back to install database. Import, export repository, and we do not want to import the repository. It's already imported, but we want to add a language. So, and the language we want to add, let's say we just go with the first in the list, French, and we have to repeat that for German. And what's the ODBC data source name? So that'll be, well, we can either use Siebel install DSN or we can use training DSN. So Siebel install is the one created by this wizard. So let's keep using it. And the database user to connect. And the table owner. Okay, that's a Unicode database, and the repository will always be Siebel repository. And where is your mstrep file, which has all the language strings? You can use that to import that. So that is the proper location here. That mstrep, the master repository, needs to be placed into that folder if you don't have it. So during installation, we choose the master repository, we extracted it. So it's a separate installation, basically, or a choice at the installation time. So we have that. We do not use parallel indexing, and we will have a, well, let's just call it imprep fra, so we can distinguish it. That will be a folder name in the Siebel log folder. and we run that right away. We can save the response file, which I think is clever. Let's call it imprep fra RSP, and because we can then run maybe an unattended mode and to import language packs, so automation is a key pattern we want to pursue here. So, and this it's quite funny that now it starts even talking French to me, and it's the le upgrade wizard, and it will do the necessary bits and pieces. Once we start that, we just see how that works in 25.2. So you can see the command line here. So you can also grab those command lines later, but of course it's highly recommended to wait for le wizard to complete. And as you can see, it's processing the data, processing the tables. So that's the first part of a language pack installation. You import the repository part. That's basically symbolic strings for this language, for French. So once this is complete, we should see the French locale popping up here. Of course, it's not complete yet. It's still running. And, this will take a few minutes, give or take. So I will just pause the recording here and come back when it's finished. So, our French friend, le assistant de mise à jour Siebel, has finished. Yeah, I find it so funny that it's just starting to talk French. We'll start to talk German in a moment. So it's finished, and let's just, refresh that. Yep, there is a symbolic string for French, and it's not the only one. All of these strings are now available as a French translation. The big question is that's the design repository we're looking at? Is that also in the runtime repository? So I was always wondering, is it importing the runtime repository as well? Of course, that's the vanilla part only. So I did a query here, select the distinct lang_cd from srr applet, and applets are heavily translated, so you can see there's the French and English already in the RR runtime repository table, so which sounds actually great. So we can maybe avoid a full publish, but Oracle says in documentation you have to actually run a full publish after importing a language. So we'll do it for good measure, but it's interesting to see it's already there. So we just run this one more time for the German language pack, right? So we have 2, so we have to run it 2 times. Add a language, this time German. And, we've been there before. So you've seen that before for French, so I will just stop the video recording, pause it, and come back before I started. So, I've picked German, and the Siebel Upgrade Assistent is now ready to run the import. And looks exactly the same, except of course for using the German strings, importing the German strings, and the German runtime repository for vanilla stuff into the database. So we've seen that before, so I'll just pause the video, pause the recording for now, and we'll see you on the other side. Okay, so our Siebel Upgrade Assistent is beended, and we can click OK on that. And OK, exit the wizard, and I've already done the distinct queries, and now we have German strings, German stuff compiled into the runtime repository table, which has just been imported as records, and we have German locale translations for symbolic strings in the repository. So would that be enough to run the German or French object managers? Well, we can give it a try. It's we are in freefall mode here, so let's give it a try. So I'm back to SMC. Let's check out the server still running, and let's check out the components. I will probably restart that German object manager. And we are grabbing, stealing, if you will, commands here. So what if we want to stop a component on the server via REST call? Can you do it? Yep, you can. So you just need to know the alias, the server name, you have your URL. So what would be your payload here? Well, easy enough. Shutdown, action, shutdown. That's interesting. So what would be the startup action? Can you guess it? So it's shutting down. Let's refresh. It's shut down. Well, let's start it up. And, well, that was easy. And that's still a post, right? Most of this stuff is post. So, yeah, now we know how to bounce a component via REST call. Always good to know. Because it's 2025 and you want to manage your Siebel environment like it's 2025, right? Not like it's 1995. So, but yeah, I'm just having fun here. And it's back online. Let's see if it really came online. So we do the app call center DEU. Is that doing anything? Nope, it's still not happy. So without even looking at the log file or so, there's something really missing. So if we're going back to WebTools or any other application that's still working, because WebTools is on safe mode, it always works. Go to Tools and List of Values. Then we'll see if we see the language name. It's all English American, so there's no. Let's try really hard to get the German or French. Nope, nothing. Okay, so that's the reason that there's some system LOVs it's looking for, and it's not finding any of those because they're not in the database. After you install it, you only have the ENU ones, so they're non-translated. So it's time for us to import the translated LOVs. Okay, how do we do that? Let's ask our friend Database Server Configuration Wizard to do it for us. And we still on Oracle, and we are now back to installing database. So there's an option here, add a language. So this means add the translated stuff into the database, most of which is LOVs. And we have run grunt user, yeah, we're way past that, and we have the connect string, so this is a little bit different. And what's your base language? So we already established English American as the base language. And what's your, well, temp? It's not really. So we import French first, and we'll repeat that for German. And we have the username with the password. Just copy paste that because I'm lazy. Table owner. Yeah, that ODBC driver thing is actually not really relevant if you check it or not. And we just get through and install French. So we have this directories. Want to apply it right now. Save the response file. Install fra. Okay, and well, here's Le French Assistant again, and it's going to import the C data, deactivate non-MLOF C data. It does some MLOF stuff. You would go, as if you have real translations, you would also run the MLOF wizard at the end. We might want to do that. So that's a few things to do. So you see it's starting up nicely, and it's, well, running data imp, the data import utility, and it's hitting on a lot of records that already exists, so that these are the errors you can see, but it's actually pretty fast. So it's not much to import. So now it's updating the workspace stuff already, so we should be, once this is finished, we should actually see some French LOVs coming up, which would be great, right? Would be terrifique. No, is that how you say it? Sorry, sorry anybody who is listening in French, French speakers. I'm not one of them. So I'll just pause the recording for a moment. I'll see you on the other side. So, well, it has finished. That means it has imported the LOV, mostly LOV data, has done all the stuff. And we can prove that now by searching for French LOVs. And there they are, all nice together in the main workspace. That's important, right? That's going to be influenced by the workspaces you have. So let's give it a try, because we're impatient. Let's fire up that French object manager. Came back online, and let's try the, do we have a French? Do we have a French profile? Nope, I don't think so, but we can change that in a second by copying the German one and making it a French one. So that's call center French. Okay, submit that. And we should be able to use call center in French. Oh, wow, look here. After importing the repository, the strings, and the translatable C data, that brings up the object manager already. So no need, doesn't need a full publish. Looks nice and complete in French, and all that stuff. Which is definitely interesting, because, well, documentation says we should run a full publish. So, of course, you must run a full publish, well, after flattening and stuff like that. But it seems to be less important than ever to run a full publish after adding language packs. I'm just speculating here, and I can just see that the object manager comes up in French, definitely. So let's see if we can create a new record here, and the status. Well, that's a non-translated LOV, so not sure. But LOV is working, and to be fully language specific, you need to do some more work, like running the MLOF utility, multilingual list of values. So, well, let's do that. Let's run the multilingual utility, which is also embedded in the database configuration wizard. You have to go for run database utilities, and you have to do the multilingual list of values conversion, and we can validate and translate, and the base language is English, and we will have our data source. That one served as well. We have usernames Well, that's always the same really, but you bear with me. Okay. We just move in here, mlof translate, and we just apply. So it's doing the thing, whatever it has to do with regards to multilingual list of values. And already done that. So that would change the way your LOVs will look like. So if they're really translatable, really multilingual, then if you log into the French version, you should see in most translated LOVs, you should see the French values only, the display values, and when you, of course, select them, it writes the language independent code, etc. So that's a true multilingual LOV. But that's just for demonstrating how to run the mlof utility. And I still have to run it for the German one. So yeah, we do it one more time. For installing the German strings into the database. So that English is our base. We have German that we want to add. And here we go again. Usual entries. And we do install DEU. Well, we just go fast forward and have it import the German strings. German C data, that is. All right, so that'll take a bit as well, and I'll see you on the other side. So while that import is running, just a few words about the multilingual list of values. So a list of value can be translated, but it must be marked as multilingual truly to be a true mlof. So I put the workflow monitoring code here as an example, and you can see it has the French and English translations. So it's translated, but it's also multilingual. So the language independent code for both, the zero value is none, so that will be written to the database. And the user will see either the French or the English. So I'm in the view here in the French application, and you can see that drop down shows the French values only. So I can work in French in my native language, if you will, and still a English user will see the English values. So you don't see any duplicate, you don't see any English and French mixed up, which can happen if your list of values is translated but not multilingual enabled. So check the documentation for more information about multilingual list of values. It's just an interesting side note that not all of the list of values out of the box are actually multilingual. You can enable them if you need to. So that wizard run is beendet, as it says here in German. And so we can, for example, query list of values, or actually the same type here. Yep, should now have German values. And indeed it has, and they're multilingual, so we have to run that multilingual utility again for German. We have done that already, so I'm not going to record it on video. And that should be enough to get our German object manager going. So final stage here. Let's see if we can get that German object manager going. So we That must be the German one. Yeah, let's shut it down. Okay, and let's start it up again. And then of course will take a while, so we'll check back when it's online. And I've refreshed the URL and we are online with a German Object Manager, der deutsche Objektverwalter is online. Okay, so here we go, and of course that's all German. So this was a demo using absolute vanilla, and keep in mind that none of the Siebel environments that are out there on customer sites, none of them are vanilla unless you want a vanilla environment deliberately to evaluate, for example, what's new in 25.2. So you could be happy with that. But if you add a language pack to an existing Siebel instance with lots of customizations, you have to flatten your workspaces and you have to run a full publish after each language pack. So that's actually the only time when Oracle says you have to run flatten and full publish. Flattening the workspaces is necessary to have a main zero workspace. And I happen to have that already. I'm going to talk you through the flatten command as well. I will not run it because it's not necessary, but typically you have hundreds of workspaces here. So you must flatten them first before you can run full publish. So how do you run that? Remember, I've just done a bare bone Siebel installation. I don't have Siebel tools, not yet. I didn't need it so far, right? Did I need it? No. But I now want to run commands like flatten workspace and full publish, where most of the documentation says siebdev exe, siebdev executable. I don't have that, and on Linux you have neither. So what Oracle built a few years ago is a utility or a headless Siebel tools, which you find in your Sieb server bin directory. So let's go straight there. Too many command lines open. It just exit here. Too much is open here. That's the SQL. So now let's do a fresh command line. Let's go to the Siebel Sieb server bin, and you find siebdev CLI. Well, on Windows it's an exe. In Linux it's a shell. And so it tells us siebdev CLI runs with a config file, optional a language, username, password, data source. That looks very familiar. It looks like the Siebel tools command line. And it is Siebel tools, but without the user interface. So it's headless. The siebdev client, the command line interface. CLI, well, client, command line interface, probably command line interface. So what you need is a CFG file. And let me show you a trick. So you can get CFG files from the Sieb server bin your language. So I'm using ENU. You could literally use any of them, but why not start with the SW tool CFG, which is for Siebel web tools. And I copied that. And I call it the copy siebdev CLI CFG. And I modified that already. So here's my modified, the copy of SW tools. So there's a CFG for Siebel web tools, but it's on the server, so it's actually not used. But it's there, so you can start here. You have to make sure that the data source has a name. Server data source, we'll configure later. The client root directory points to Sieb server, and the temp directory points to Sieb server temp. So make sure that's in there. Then you must set the server ODBC data source to a valid data source. Again, we are 25.2, so it's all about data sources and ODBC. And the other parameters that I changed was here to also set the data source name in the security adapter, and there's the vanilla data sources, and you can create a new one, but I just choose to edit the server data source down here. So I made sure the connect string is okay, the table owner, the DLL, SQL style. You can copy paste that from here. And also these two, I'm not sure if you need them, but just for good measure. So now I have a CFG file. So what I can do now, I can run siebdev CLI with that CFG file. And pass a username and the password and the data source. And that's server data src. And if I run that, nothing happens. There's no user interface. It's just active for a few moments, like it's logging in, establishing a session, and finding out that it doesn't have to do anything because I didn't add any other switches. You can add a lot of switches here, like, well, flatten workspace and stuff like that. So it just finishes. And if you don't get an error message, you have a correct CFG file. So it's a nice little trick. So get that siebdev CLI running because you need it for some stuff. And we need it, for example, to run a flatten workspace command. So I just want to make sure we're on the same page. So I'm opening Bookshelf here, the Using Siebel Tools Guide, the section about flattening workspaces. And here you see the only time that flattening workspaces is required is after the addition of a new language using the Siebel Database Configuration Wizard and before mlov conversion. So you have to rerun the mlov conversion after that. There are no other situations that require flattening workspace operation. So you might argue that, well, we have those 1,000 workspaces, developer and integration workspaces, not 1,000 hopefully, and we want to get rid of them. We want to clean up the workspaces. You can delete those workspaces, right? In modern Siebel versions, you can delete any type of workspaces with a delete command. So there's no need to flatten your workspaces. And Oracle tells you right here, that's the only time you do this is during the new language thing. And so you add the new language, you deliver the workspaces in main, so that's happened for me. You archive any workspaces that are in progress because flattening destroys your work if you haven't delivered it into main. Run flatten workspace and then run mlov conversion. And also run enable workspace, which is also during new language. So I'm not sure if enable workspace is necessary, but we'll see. We'll follow the instructions here. Execute the full publish process. So full publish requires flatten. So there is a section server ODBC data source is correctly set. And here's how you run a flatten. And it says in the guide, it says use siebdev, so that's Siebel Tools. But can we run it with siebdev CLI? It's just one more command, flatten workspace. So that's it. Nothing else. So let's try run it on siebdev CLI. Okay, we're back on the machine. And we are going. Not sure where we're going because it's a main 0 workspace, so maybe it just figures it out and says nothing to do here, but we can watch it at work. So siebdev CLI is hard at work figuring out stuff and seems to have figured out it has nothing to do. So in our repository, nothing really changed. So we still have that repository base version 0, and that is what you get after running flatten on a big custom repository, even with hundreds or thousands of workspaces, you're back to main zero. And adding languages is the only place where I do this. So now we run the full publish, and the full publish comes after the mlof conversion. So I'm going to run the mlof conversion one more time, and then I will actually not enable the workspace because it's enabled. I think that's here because of an older version of the flattened workspace, disable the workspaces. And I will see if I need that, but I will run the mlof. So the mlof, going to use the database server config wizard, utilities, multilingual conversion, translate, and we have English as the base language, and we have our ODBC data source, username, well, the usual bit. You've seen this before. And that actually goes super fast, I recall. So just, yeah, is done. So, okay, mlof done as per the documentation. So now we can run the full publish. And the full publish actually requires a language flag. So I'm in Siebel Bookshelf again, just to get to the full command. Notice we don't use siebdef, we use siebdef CLI, but the TL parameter, the tools language parameter, requires a language or a list of languages, like here. So you can run for individual languages one at a time or all the languages at the same time. So yeah, let's try that. So I've added the TL parameter with the 3 languages. So I want to go all in and run this all at the same time. So siebdef CLI can perfectly do what siebdef can do. I guess that's true, so I haven't really validated that claim, but anything I did in the past was working that way. So the full publish, the siebdef CLI, let's see what happens. I made my claim, and we're in the goof around and find out phase. And here it is. Not sure why it wasn't available before, but it took a while. Maybe it's just my session hung or something. So siebdef CLI is running in full publish mode, and when you run this in Siebel Tools, here you see actually the database becoming busy, and it would actually spin off separate tasks, but Siebel Tools does that. Not sure siebdef CLI. We'll see. And we just find out we got an error. Okay, so that's bad. Okay, so the short answer is, after goofing around and finding out, siebdef CLI cannot do full publish. At least I'm not able to do it. I ended up installing, well, Siebel Tools, and you see it runs quite spectacularly here for 4 times, or 5 times actually. And that is because I ran it from, well, I installed Siebel Tools and then I ran it using siebdef exe. Just trying to find that. Here is the process. Yeah. Okay, you see 5 processes, very busy currently. Yeah. Publishing all my languages at once. So message is install Siebel tools, and then use the siebdev executable. As you can see here, I can show you the command line I ran. So this was the command line siebdev with the tool CFG, use server data source, username, password, and the tools languages for the full publish. Okay, so that is definitely taking the better part of an hour or so, or even longer, depends on the throughput of the database, and that will publish all the runtime repository tables in all the 3 languages. So it's like a full compile in the old days when we had an SRF file, long gone are these days, and I hope for you too, unless you're really running on an old Siebel version, you should definitely consider an upgrade. So with that, the full publish running, I will, say goodbye to you and wish you a happy 30th Siebel anniversary. Bye bye, take care.